So the last few days have been absolutely amazing. What has happened in Washington and then in Kyiv and again back in Washington. I'm going to show you the whole story since the budget compromise and then what the European Union leaders did and then what just happened to McCarthy. Okay, so this was just a few days ago, Saturday, September 30th. This is Defense News. Congress avoids government shutdown and drops Ukraine aid. And this was kind of a bad look. What happened was they were trying to pass through their budgets. The Republicans and Democrats couldn't agree on multiple issues, not necessarily related to Ukraine, although Ukraine kept factoring into it. They instead passed a continuing resolution, which meant we got 45 days of the previous budget, and then we'll come back and address this again before Thanksgiving. So that's what happened there. But nothing was added additionally to Ukraine. Biden said this. Biden vowed to stand by Ukraine despite a budget fiasco. It's a temporary measure pushed through to avoid a government shutdown. And government shutdowns happen in the United States. This is just kind of part of when they can't get along as they're contending for who's going to get what. When there's a Democratic administration and a Republican Congress or vice versa, this happens. Okay, temporary measure pushed through to avoid a government shutdown did not include $6 billion in military aid for Kyiv, a top White House priority. We cannot, under any circumstance, allow U.S. support to Ukraine to be interrupted, Mr. Biden said. I can reassure Ukraine we will get there, that we're going to get it done, he said, on restoring funding for the war. I want to assure our American allies that you can count on our support. We will not walk away. President Biden has requested another $24 billion or 19 billion pounds. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Now, the way that it's spun on RT is very different. They make it sound like the U.S. government's just running out of money. It's only a matter of time before they won't be able to support Kyiv. So listen to what he has to say. I'm going to emphasize something here, but I just want you to hear him, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
It's getting harder to keep dumping money into Ukraine when the American government itself is having its own cash flow problems. Aid to Kiev was removed from the...
Okay, now hold on. There is a large national deficit, but it's not the same as cash flow problems. Like we're on the edge of bankruptcy. If anything, Russia seems to be teetering on that kind of knife edge of fiscal insolvency. If you look at the ruble to the dollar, it's been in bad shape, and that bad shape is the inflated bad shape that they're projecting to the world, not what's, I believe, really going on. I can't prove it, so I'm not going to say, like, I'm sure that this is the case, but I think something's far worse in Russia's budgetary system. Okay, let's keep going.
Spending bill that was passed by Congress and signed into law by Biden to prevent a government shutdown. However, U.S. officials say it will not hamper their ability to continue supplying Kiev with money in the short term. However, it does raise questions about long-term aid.
Did you hear that? It won't be a problem in the short term, but in the long term, we don't know. Now, that's how he's framing what's being said, but that's not what's being said. Listen carefully to what the people in the next few clips say.
While we have the ability to continue to support Ukraine's ability to defend itself in the immediate term, we have already exhausted much of the existing security assistance funding.
It is enough
from the budget, not from ability to be able to do it. And those are two different things, but it's being projected to be something very different.
For us to meet Ukraine's urgent battlefield needs for a bit longer, but we'll be maintaining our steady cadence of PDAs for sure. But it is not the long-term solution here. It is not.
Because we're talking about what's been allocated by the budget. Do you understand the difference here? That is very key, but it's being projected as something else.
A long-term solution.
The Pentagon is now raising questions about how to sustain the army, and not the Ukrainian army, the American one.
We have already been forced to slow down the replenishment of our own forces to hedge against an uncertain funding future. Failure to replenish our military services on a timely basis could harm our military's readiness.
The Ukrainian foreign minister insisted that money must keep flowing to Kiev and said that those who don't do it are playing into the hands of Putin.
Найбільше очікування Путіна
Putin's greatest expectation is precisely that the West and the world will tire of standing on the side of Ukraine in this war. Russia is directing huge resources to this. We should not play along with them.
Kiev's endless begging is starting to become the topic of punchlines.
Endless begging. Notice how they frame it. So the U.S. government is running out of money. By the way, let's go back and look at how he framed it again. Okay, let's just listen to what he said, and then you think back to those clips. Were they talking about we don't have enough in the budget, or we're broke, we can't afford anything else?
However, U.S. officials say it will not hamper their ability to continue supplying Kiev with money in the short term. However, it does raise questions about long-term aid.
Okay, do you see how he framed it? So that's really deceptive. That's lying without actually using false words to lie. It's a really tricky way of doing that. Okay, let's keep going.
Billionaire Elon Musk claims to have donated over $100 million to Ukraine by providing access to the Starlink satellite. But even he is now making jokes and sharing memes regarding Kiev's endless begging.
And if you want to see more about Musk, I did a video about him just yesterday. Please look it up.
Polls in the United States indicate that the American public is growing weary of this so-called investment in what's looking to be possibly a quite long-term conflict with Russia.
And this is another standard Russian talking point. Zelensky keeps begging, the U.S. is running out of money, there's war weariness, and they're going to abandon Kyiv, and so on and so forth.
Biden administration has indicated that their aim is to continue sending money no matter what.
And if Putin thinks he can outlast us, he's wrong. He's wrong. And so we will have another package of aid for Ukraine soon to signal our continued support for the brave people of Ukraine. And so that's our message. If he thinks he can outlast us, that is Mr. Putin, we believe he's wrong.
It's an open question about whether or not these sentiments will find expression when voters go to the polls. But it seems like U.S. dialogue about providing more money and weapons to Ukraine is at a tipping point. And for the first time, those skeptical of Ukraine have the upper hand. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Okay, so that is what RT wants to project. I found it interesting because I'm kind of a nerd. I'm looking on the shelves behind here, and okay, Plato I get, but When China Rules the World is another book on the shelf, and it's all often interesting to see what goes on behind the scenes here. Okay, let's get back to the main topic though. EU makes a historic show of support for Ukraine after the US budget deal snub. It wasn't a budget deal snub, it was a continuing resolution doing that as opposed to actually doing what they should have been doing in a budget itself, and they're allowed to do that. It's not something that is preferable, but they can continue to do that. But here's what the Europeans did, and I applaud the Europeans for this. This was awesome. All 27 European Union foreign ministers descended on Kyiv Monday in a historic show of support after the passage of a U.S. funding bill that included no new aid for Ukraine and left the future support of the war with Russia in balance. A little bit further, by coming to Kyiv, the European Union foreign ministers sent a strong message of solidarity and support to Ukraine in the face of this unjust and illegitimate war, Borrell said. It's also sending a strong signal to Russia. We are not intimidated by your missiles or your drones, he added. Now, that's really important. Kevin McCarthy's out of the picture, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. A little bit more about this. Amid concerns about weakening support for Ukraine, Zelensky says victory depends on cooperation with the EU. There's a line in here. You can be sure of our determination to be at Ukraine's side as long as it takes, Borrell told Zelensky after the meeting, and Putin's great expectation is precisely that the West and the world will tire of standing on the side of the Ukraine in this war. Last little bit from here, how much do they pony up? Well, it turns out to be about 5 billion euros. Or 5.25 billion. It's not the 6 billion that the U.S. was trying to cough up at this point, and so it's a little bit short. But honestly, the solidarity from the EU is actually a huge sign worth, I mean, it's not going to buy bullets, but it's actually really, really powerful. It does a couple of things. One, it shows a sign of solidarity. Two, it also diffuses a little bit of the opposition in the West of those who are saying, well, you know, it's in their backyard, they ought to be doing it, and why are we funding them when they're like, they need to be stepping up. The EU needs to step up in a big way, and they just stepped into the breach. Now, that being said, what's just happened here with McCarthy being ousted as speaker yesterday, I'm going to do another entire video about this. I did just a quick 2-minute like breaking news update about what happened, but my goal is, if I can get to it today, and I'm going to really try, is to just explain all the background and what's going to happen, because this was a terrible thing for Ukraine. I said yesterday that McCarthy was a friend of Ukraine, and people are like, oh, he doesn't really care. He's actually been very useful and very pro-Ukraine in the way that he tried to lead and manage. No, he didn't even let Zelensky speak. Yes, because he was walking a tightrope, and I'll explain that tightrope in another video. Hey, thanks for your time. Thanks for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. Thank you for the coffees. Sharing is caring. Thanks for sharing and liking. When you share this video, it goes places. When you like it, it tells YouTube's algorithm that this is something that ought to be propagated. Please do that. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.